Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to attend today's workshop. My name is Daria Orlowska. I am the data librarian here at Waldo Library, and I'm here with Dr. Lynette Hoelter. She's the archivist and director of instructional resources at ICPSR, and together we're your guides today to finding secondary data utilizing our fantastic library resource, ICPSR. Like I said, I'll be recording this, so if you want to share it with someone else afterwards, or if you want to watch it again, you can feel free to do that. Okay, so after attending this workshop, you should be able to learn how to gain access to ICPSR as well as all the secondary data, employ strategies demonstrated to find the right secondary data for your research within the ICPSR platform, gain awareness of major collections and hidden data gems in ICPSR so that you have a better sense of what this resource has to offer. We will also be ending this session with a brief overview of some other resources ICPSR has to offer, and obviously we'll have lots of time to ask questions. But if you have any questions that you want to ask in the middle of this presentation, feel free to either type that in the chat, I will be monitoring it, or you can unmute yourself to ask your questions directly if that's easier. I will also be sharing a link to slides and to a feedback form at the end of this presentation. So keep an eye out for that. If you don't want to stay the entire time, if you've registered, you should get that link in your email. Okay, so let's get started. What is ICPSR? ICPSR is one of the world's oldest and largest social media data archives. It is housed at the University of Michigan and supported by more than 750 member institutions, including Western. So ICPSR receives data deposited by various data producers such as research agencies, the government, and professors, and then cleans that data by standardizing variables and providing documentation so that others can reuse it and share the data on the website, providing long-term persistent access and linking it with publications to make it more discoverable. ICPSR also provides educational and training resources for instructors and students on data literacy and assists researchers with fulfilling data sharing requirements mandated by funders and journals. So as I mentioned, ICPSR has a lot of data, specifically over 10,000 studies and 80,000 data sets as of the beginning of this year. All data sets are fully documented and come in a variety of formats, depending on how individuals would like to work with them, even offering online analysis capabilities. So data is divided into two categories: on demand, which contains readily accessible de-identified data, and restricted data, which contains sensitive data that requires additional clearance by ICPSR and the IRB in order for access to be granted. In addition, some data can be accessed by anyone in the general public without logging into ICPSR, while other data is only available to individuals affiliated with member institutions like Western. So depending on how things were curated and cleaned, like whether there was a funding agency that covered those costs or if researchers covered those costs, that depends on where that data set ends up, whether it's available only for members or for the entire public. So as you see here, there's a variety of different files that you could download. There's SAS files, SPSS, and Stata, and general data files that you can use with Excel if that's your preference. So do I need to log in to use ICPSR data? Like I mentioned, while there are some data sets that are freely available to everyone without a membership, by logging into your account, you're proving your affiliation to Western Michigan. We pay for the membership as a member institute, so you can access this data for free, which means you gain access to all the data and analytical tools on the platform. It also helps us, the library, see that other people are using it, and we can either help you if you have any additional questions, or we can just prove to our administration that people are using it. We should continue providing this resource for you. So you can obtain access by clicking the login button at the top of the screen and then going to create an account at the bottom of the page to verify your affiliation. You can use your WMISH email to create your account, and you'll get a verification email that will get sent to you to authorize your account. Keep in mind that you probably will want to do this the first time from a campus computer or using the VPN because it uses your IP address in order to just to verify that you're affiliated with Western, and that will keep you authenticated for the next 6 months, after which it will prompt you again to make sure that you have you're affiliated with the institution. Okay. Okay, so show me the data. If you attended the first workshop in the secondary data series, you may remember that we talked in depth about considerations for picking the right secondary data for your needs. In case you weren't able to attend or need a refresher, here are just some main points to summarize. So as with any project, start with developing a research question to identify exactly what data you're looking for. I would suggest writing out some main keywords and generating some synonyms that can broaden your search terms. ICPSR has a thesaurus that can help you with this step, and we'll go over that and how you can access that. But it is also a good place to identify inclusion and exclusion criteria, potential variables of interest, and how these are connected to the data sources that you're hoping to use. I would also suggest creating maybe like a workflow like this one to help you visualize the connections. Okay. After that, take into consideration your research timeline. Whether you're searching in a repository like ICPSR or using several sources, it's important to understand if the data is readily available or if acquiring it is more time consuming. Can you just download it, or do you need to request it from an organization or author? Is the data de-identified, or do you need to request clearance to use restricted data along with IRB approval? Is the data in a format that's easily usable, like a CSV? Does it need to be transformed or cleaned in order to prepare it for analysis? After that, you locate the data using the criteria you have developed. When you find a potential data set, start by assessing the data source credibility. Have there been credible publications with this data? Are there any methodological issues? Is the documentation good enough so that you understand how to use that data? So data in ICPSR has varying amounts of curation depending on the data set or the collection, but the documentation has been standardized and publications using the data set are linked for viewing. So that makes that step a little bit easier than maybe if you were to go to a self-depositing repository or trying to find data out in the wild. Next, evaluate the relevance of the data in relation to your own needs. What was the original data's purpose, and what was the methodology? Do your research questions require a specific population, or do you need several data sets for oversampling in order to compare subsamples? Are you interested in a certain time period or in trends over time? What is the smallest data unit for data analysis that you need for your research? Is it at the individual level? Do you need it at like the county level, the state level? Okay. Questions, comments? I'm very bad at pausing, so feel free to continue asking your questions. I know Lynette has got it picking up my slack. Okay, so now that we covered some of the ways you can determine what the right data is for your project, let's begin exploring the various ways you can find data within the repository so you can feel confident about using the platform on your own. Using the top menu, if you navigate to find data, let me see if I can do laser pointer right here, and then use that drop-down menu to go into find data, you'll end up with this window right here to access the main data search. ICPSR uses a search platform which does not correct misspellings or search variations, so just be cognizant of that when you're typing things in. The search terms that you're writing in can be found anywhere in the study. That's in the title, description, variables. And because the holdings are so large, we recommend that you use at least 2 phrases in order to narrow down your criteria, but you can use as many as you would like in order to create a search. I would also recommend that you use things like quotation marks if you want to have an exact search or if you're looking for an exact phrase, because if you put it outside of the quotation marks, it will treat each word with an, like they will put an and in between each of those words. Keep in mind that a search for nation will give you results such as national, but a search for Robert Smith might get you Rob Smith, but not Bob Smith. So there's some logic there. And you can mix and match those searches within quotation marks, like I mentioned, that are exact searches with inexact searches. So you could do United States as one phrase and inmates as another. And putting like a minus sign or a hyphen in front of a word will actually remove it from the search query. So if you want to not have the United States pop up as a country, you could go ahead and do minus United States. Another great way to find data and to figure out what your search criteria is to go ahead and use this thesaurus. So it will provide you with some broader terms, narrower terms, related terms, and preferred terms for searching for what you're looking for. So when we talked about creating your research question, you might be looking at minorities. This is a good place to go and search that and see what kind of phrases you also might be searching for, or if there is a phrase that maybe you should be searching for within the platform to get you the right set of results. So for example, in this case, you have healthcare and your broader terms are health, narrower terms are patient care, and then you have a few other related terms like drug costs or illness or service providers. That could be good things that you insert in order to either broaden or narrow your search. Okay, so after running an initial search, you can use the left menu to filter results by a variety of criteria to further narrow your search. You can also choose to view all. You don't have to put in a search criteria if you don't want to, but that will give you all the results within the platform, and then you really need to use the filters to narrow things down since there are so many holdings. Once you filter a search, the URL will update to reflect your selection, and you can copy and paste that URL as a reference for yourself in the future if you want to rerun your search or if you want to share it with someone else. But as you see on the left-hand menu, there's a variety of criteria for filters. And then we also have a top menu right here. Let's see here. That has different categories for what it searches in. And depending on which of these tabs you select, you might get different filters. So the first one is studies, in which you see ICPSR plus a number to indicate within that something is held within ICPSR. You might see other indicators about where that data is being held, like you might see OpenIPSR here, which is a self-publishing repository where data sets are deposited by researchers and published as is. And you also might see something like Data Lumos, which is a crowdsourced repository for government data. The next header here is variables, which lists any variables across all ICPSR studies that use the search keywords in the description. You'll see series, which are the studies that are part of a longitudinal series most often. You have data-related publications, which are just publications that have been linked to data sets held by ICPSR. And then you have ICPSR website, which are just other resources within the website. Okay. Any questions? No? Good. Okay, so data-related publications are any publication using ICPSR data that also relate to the search keyword. This can be a useful strategy if you're looking to investigate a certain topic but not sure what data set to use, or if you want to see if an analysis has already been conducted. This can also be a fantastic classroom tool if you're thinking about introducing this to students. You can read the article to see if a researcher investigated a related topic, and then easily navigate to the same data set that they used to conduct further analysis. You can access this page either through the main search, which we talked about, it was just at the top here, or by accessing the ICPSR bibliography of data-related literature, which will allow you to browse data-related publications by author, journal, or study. This list of data-related publications is pulled together by staff at ICPSR, who scour articles for data citations and often just mentions of ICPSR or mentions of like study titles within the methodology. A lot of the times authors do not do a good job citing data sets. So if you are going to use data from ICPSR and you want to publish it, make sure you're citing the data set. It'll make their job very much easier, and you will be featured in this search as well, so that other people can read your work as it relates to data sets. Okay. After locating a potential study you might be interested in, either through browsing by find data and filtering your results, or through identifying a publication that uses a specific data set, you will find yourself within the study page where you can examine whether the data set fits your needs more closely. So as we see here, this is an example of a survey of jail inmates. That's your study title. You might see a series link. So if there are multiple data sets that relate to a similar study within a series, that could be useful if you're trying to compare across years and want to see what's available. The top menu here provides you with a variety of options. The at a glance will give you a basic project description. Then you have data and documentation, which is where you can find a codebook that kind of outlines what was done with the study. The variables, which were cleaned, and you can see all of them that were collected. The data-related publications, and then exporting the metadata, which is citations primarily. Okay, the right menu also provides impact statistics, so how many downloads, and a usage report that provides some information about who is using the data. It also contains a number of data-related publications associated with the data set, which is the exact same screen as the data-related publications up here. It will just tell you a number. Below that, there you have some notes about who can use the data set, whether they're public access files or if it's restricted access, and you might have to go ahead and fill out a form so that you're clear to use that. There's also sometimes information right underneath the notes, which provides additional resources that can either guide you through an analysis, or it could be a good tool if you wanted to use that in the classroom. Other things you may want to pay attention to is who funded the research, which can be found under funding right here, and also who prepared the data set to be used on ICPSR. To inform you what other works you may need to. So the other thing that I would recommend you doing is, if you keep scrolling down on this at a glance menu, is that you will get some additional information like scope of project, methodology, and versions. The version history will give you some important information about the cleaning steps ICPSR took when curating the data set, which can help inform about what you may need to do to the data before analyzing it, so you can see what steps have already been conducted. You will also need to download the codebook found under data and documentation to get a better sense of the methodology, because what you have here is a simplified at a glance version, but if you download that codebook, it will give you some more information. And it will give you a sense of the methodology, the variable codings, the statistics performed, and sometimes how missing data was treated. Okay, so if you are interested in combining multiple data sets, either from the same series or across different studies, compare variables, is an additional tool that allows you to examine and compare variables and questions. This is a great way to see if the questions have changed across time, if they're get a sense of the collection time period, and quickly maybe see what the frequencies are to find out if there are enough responses to warrant analysis. So this is what it looks like. You go ahead and you can browse by study or series or by keyword, and it'll provide a list of studies with their variables, and you can just select which variables you're interested in and click compare. And it brings up a menu, and you can see what the questions were, which can also be useful if you're creating your own survey and want to see what questions were being asked, what time periods, who was involved in this collection, and then what are the frequencies. If you do want to get more information about the data and find out if the analysis has enough power, another thing that you might want to look at is the built-in analysis tool that will kind of take you to look at the data set on the platform without having to download the data set. But I believe we're going to be talking about that in the next workshop, so I will not cover that today. And finally, if you're unsure of what you want to search for, you can try using some collections pre-prepared for you by ICPSR. So under Find Data, you can browse and select Thematic Data Collection. And these are data collections brought to you by several federal statistic agencies and foundations, and are mostly accessible without belonging to an ICPSR member institution because they've been paid for or funded by these organizations that have made sure that they are curated and available to the public. Each of these thematic collections will bring you to a portal dedicated to highlighting the material and may contain additional resources such as webinars on the collection or researcher interviews. So if you're interested in a specific collection, if you go in there, you will also see a similar interface to what we saw in under Find Data, but it will only search within that collection. So if you then decide that this is not what you're looking for, you will want to navigate out back into Find Data to explore all of the collections, not just the ones that are contained within here. Okay, so that is it for my part temporarily. Do I have any questions? I know it's a lot of material. Any thoughts? Anything that wasn't clear you would like me to elaborate on? Okay. Well, in that case, now I want to turn things over to our guest, Dr. Lynette Hoelter, so that she can highlight some data collections within ICPSR that you might be interested in.
Thanks, Daria. I asked for people to put their areas of interest or their discipline in the chat to make sure that I was kind of on track with what I pulled to highlight, and I think that I actually covered just about everybody's area. So just a quick, this kind of pairs with what Daria was saying. I find that it's often useful to think about what you can and can't get at ICPSR in terms of types of data. And so we like to say that we are social and behavioral sciences quite broadly defined. We cover more than 40 different disciplines and interdisciplinary areas. We have primarily data about individuals, all the way from early childhood, or actually there are some surveys of pregnant mothers, so even before birth, through elderly, and again, we have some surveys about questions about end-of-life care and things like that, so even right up to the two edges of life. We also have data about institutions. Judging by some of your interest areas, you might be interested in some of the data about hospitals or mental health facilities, emergency room visits, things like that. So we do have that as well. And I like to point out that we even have data about horses. that data set. Those links are in there. You can follow them if you want. Those data are about the height of horses in the Habsburg Empire. Who wouldn't want those data, right? We actually also have a data set about Michigan fish. It's not super useful, but we have it. We have data primarily about the recent era, but we have everything going back to the 1100s, or might as well count that as 1200s. Those data are about private executions in England. So if you're criminal justice interest, you might be interested in those. But primarily we have data from the 20th and 21st century, 18th, sorry, 19th, 20th, and 21st. It's primarily survey and other raw data types, so administrative data, things like that. As Daria mentioned, we also try to provide documentation to help you understand the data, the code book that she was talking about. We present the questionnaire if we have it, or if it's administrative data, the form that was used to collect the data. In cases of interview administrative data, if the researchers give us the interview guide, we make that available to you as well. And each of these data, as Daria showed you, is available in different file formats so that hopefully you can find one that fits your needs. And Daria did a great job talking about the publications, so I don't need to talk about that one. And about restricted and public use data. So I think I can go to the next slide. Yep. So sometimes it's useful to know what you won't find. Often when people hear the word data, they think of like the summary data tables that you might find on the census website or something like that. We don't have that as much as we have the underlying raw data. So you won't find quick answers to Google type questions. If you type into our search box, how many people speak a second language, you'll get a list of results of data that may or may not help you find that answer, but we won't give you the answer itself. We don't, for the most part, have summary charts or tables of data. One of the archives I oversee, the National Archive of Data on Arts and Culture, does have some of those, but it's the exception rather than the rule. You won't find identifiable information about individuals or organizations. So I always like to say, if you're looking for your dirt on, if you're looking for dirt on your next door neighbor because you want to run against them in some, city election, you're not going to find it at ICPSR. We do that disclosure review before we release the data. We're also not the first place that you should look for data that are purely genetics or physics or engineering, anything that doesn't have a sort of human connection or a tie to the social world. We probably don't have. We do have a lot of data that crosses over. So one of the archives that I'll tell you about actually has brain scan images from stroke victims. So those are things you might not typically expect to find in a social science archive, but they are paired with data about the individual and their lifestyle and things like that. So we're also not the best place to look for data to use in GIS or some of the other mapping packages. Google has made it super easy to map data, but one of the first things that we take off in our disclosure reviews of data is detailed geography. So probably not the best place to look for data like that. We are incorporating more new data types every day. So we have some image data. We have some autopsy photos, if that's your thing. They're restricted use, but they're in our criminal justice archive. We're also getting more and more qualitative data, but again, that's not going to be, if you know that you're looking for qualitative data to begin with, you probably want to start with a qualitative data repository out of Syracuse or one of the other archives that focuses on qualitative data. We do have some, but it's not the bulk of our holdings. But we are working on We just received a pretty large social science infrastructure grant from the National Science Foundation. And one of the things that we're building with those monies is a video data archive. So we will soon have more of that. And then social media data, we're just getting little bits in. We have lots of surveys about use of social media and things like that, but we don't have the actual data. But again, social media data archive is on our plate for the near future as well. This slide just shows you the most commonly or most frequently downloaded data from the last, for this current fiscal year. So from July 1st, 2021 through last week. These are the data sets that are most frequently downloaded. And I usually just use this slide to show kind of the breadth of topics that are covered by ICPSR data. So the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent to Adult Health is a huge data collection effort out of North Carolina. They follow people over time for, I believe, close to 25 years now. There's lots of data about the focal individual, as well as data from their parents, their teachers, their data about their friends, things like that. So there's just a lot you can do with those data, and that's part of why they come up as consistently as the most popular download. The India Human Development Survey is close to overtaking AdHealth as our most commonly downloaded data. If you're familiar with the General Social Survey in the United States, data collection effort of attitudes and kind of lifestyle, situation that's been going on since the 1970s, the 1972. The India Human Development Survey is a similar data collection effort for India. And it was interesting to see, you can see that the American National Election Study is on there. Obviously, this that would be for the 2020 national election. It was interesting to see earlier in the pandemic when there was lots of focus on police brutality. We had even more surveys like the Police Public Contact Survey showing up in the popular downloads. Next slide, please. So Daria mentioned the special topics or thematic collections. This slide just presents them sort of grouped by broad topic area. So she mentioned the thematic collections as being a place to start if you're interested in a broad area. This takes it one level up and organizes those broad areas into broader areas. And next slide, please. And all of those are linked, so you can just use those links to jump right out to those pages if you're interested. She mentioned that some of you were interested in the webinar that preceded this one, that some of you might be interested in the Resource Center for Minority Data, so I did want to highlight that. It's our only member-funded topical archive, so those data are data that you have access to as a affiliate of Western Michigan. They started out as an archive that had a focus on racial and ethnic minority populations, immigrant populations, primarily in the US. They have since broadened to include more international data, but also fairly recently have started a really intentional focus on sexual orientation and gender identity data. And so I listed their top downloads here. You can see a number of them deal with the US Transgender Survey, National Transgender Discrimination Survey, mapping LGBTQ equality, looks actually at laws. So the state, I believe it's state level laws, are the cases in those data, as well as the National Neighborhood Crime Study. Stress in America is that has oversampling of some of the smaller populations, so that you can do the kinds of comparisons that would be necessary to look at some of those subpopulations in the U.S. And then I pulled several of our health-related archives. So I noticed that someone talked about vision and eyesight. My guess for you might be that a place you might want to start is the Archive of Data on Disability to Enable Policy. I can't think of a specific data set off the top of my head, but I would guess that they may have something. This archive focuses a lot on rehabilitation medicine, occupational therapy, intervention programs, assistive devices, things like that. It's primarily US data, but not entirely. Next slide, please. The Health and Medical Care Archive is a long-standing ICPSR archive. It houses data that were from projects that were funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And this is the archive to go to if you're interested in health institutions or health care. So they have a lot of large-scale surveys of the American public and their health habits, their health attitudes, the school age health behavior survey is in there, the National Survey of Health, things like that. They have information about access to healthcare and use of healthcare, as well as surveys of people in the healthcare profession. So they've got lots of nursing surveys and public health professional kind of surveys. And then they also have lots of data evaluating different kind of programs for delivering health care. So if you're interested in the healthcare area specifically, that might be a place to start. I also listed here the National Addiction and HIV Data Archive Program. That one's a mouthful. You'll see the acronyms next to them. We also, in addition to data, we specialize in barely pronounceable acronyms. So this one's NADAP, which I can never remember what it stands for, so I have to write it out. But they have a lot of data. They're funded by the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and so they have lots of data on risk behaviors, drug use and abuse, mental health. They have data that focus on drug use and abuse among specific subpopulations, so inmates, juvenile delinquents, things like groups like that, as well as teen and youth drug use in general. So you may have heard studies about high school and college students vaping behaviors, things like that. Those often come from the Monitoring the Future survey, which is found in NADAP. And then one of our newest repositories is the Patient-Centered Outcomes Data Repository, or PACODER. And this is data that were from projects funded by the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. So they have made as a requirement of their funding that people share their data. And so ICPSR is the archive of record for those data as well. Next slide. I put this one in there. I'm not sure if it's of interest to any of you, but we recently launched, as in within the last month, an inventory of restricted data from the Federal Statistical System. This is a program that comes from the congressional mandate of the Evidence-Based Policy Act from 2018. And so the goal of that act is to allow greater access to data and transparency in allowing people to use data so that it can be used for policy making. So this is we're doing this as a joint project with 16 federal agencies and programs in the federal statistical system. Right now, it's just an inventory of the data. The agencies on the screen are the agencies that are represented, and they're entering their own metadata. So ICPSR does not hold the data, but we will point to it. So we have those standardized descriptions of the data, and then it directs you where to go to actually apply to use the data. This summer, we will add to this inventory the application system. So a big focus of the effort is on a standard application process. So that if you're applying for data from any of these statistical agencies, you can use a single application. And that's coming this summer. Next slide, please. I wanted to give a shout out to our OpenICPSR self-published data archive. So if you're collecting your own data or writing a paper based on data, especially if you're publishing in a journal where the editors require you to share your data before they'll publish your article, OpenICPSR is a great place to do that. So the data that you find here are not curated, like Daria described the data in the ICPSR collection as, being, they go through the disclosure risk review, they get quality checks to make sure that there aren't any weird codes, the standardized code book is created, things like that. These data don't have that. This is whatever the depositor puts in is what you get, but the topic areas are fascinating, and a lot of the data is more recent because it takes a while to curate data, both for us to get it in and then for us to do the work of curation. So sometimes you can get more recent data in the self-published data archive. So I wanted to give a shout out to that. And you can see that the search results page of OpenICPSR looks just like the search results from the main ICPSR site. And as Daria mentioned, if you do a site on the main ICPSR, if you do a search on the main ICPSR site, you will get OpenICPSR studies, unless you do the minus OpenICPSR to leave them out. And I think, yep, just some final hints. I will echo what Daria said, which is if you're searching within a topical archive or a thematic collection, it only searches the data that are held by that archive. And sometimes funders have limits on what can be in there. So I direct the National Archive of Data on Arts and Culture, and they tell us we have 5 what they call micro data sets a year that they pay for curation for, and they tell us what those 5 data sets will be. So we don't get to say, oh, here's these cool other data about arts, can we include them? Well, we often ask. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes no. But those kind of restrictions are in place for other archives as well. So it may not be that all of the data that we have on a particular topic is held within that single thematic collection. A friend of mine who also does these presentations often says we have the archive of data on aging and the archive of data on criminal justice, but if you're looking for data on aging criminals, it might not be in either one of those. It might be in ICPSR. So often just starting at that the find data page or the search box that's on any of the ICPSR pages is your best way to go. One of the things that often throws people is, Daria mentioned the filters on the side. You can also sort your search results. And we have both something called recently released and updated and time period. And people often think that the recent release or recent updates should be our most data about the most recent time period. And in most cases that's true, but when I was looking for data for something else this morning, I noticed that we just last week released something about the 1840 census. So it was recently released, but not from a time period that was recent. So that's the distinction between those two. And if you want to stick to just the curated data that Daria mentioned, you can use that minus OpenICPSR in your search box, and that'll take out all of the OpenICPSR studies right from the start. And I think that that is all I had.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lynette. It's always great to hear from someone who kind of sits in it a little bit more than the rest of us and find out like where are some good starting points and what are some data sets that might be of interest to this group. And ICPSR has a lot of resources and it more than just we covered right now. Um, in fact, there is a summer program that happens annually that can be a really great resource for individuals who are hoping to conduct some statistics or find out how to use this data or in practice. And there's actually scholarships that happen. I think, isn't there the deadline at the end of the month, Lynette?
I believe that is correct. I think
Yeah.
the 31st of this month is, I think, the deadline.
Yeah, so if you or you know anyone else who might be interested in that, that's a great thing to check out. I think they're hybrid. So even though it's not that far away, it's in Ann Arbor, so we're pretty close. But if you wanted to attend virtually, that's also an option. There's
I
also
think
a
they're,
lecture. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I think the program is hybrid, but the courses are for the most part either in person or online. So check that on their website if there's a particular course that you're interested in. I'm not sure that all of them are actually hybrid within the course.
Got it. Yeah, and I know that they also did a lecture series during the summer that is free that you don't have to pay to attend. That's also a great introduction to some of these topics. In addition, ICPSR has a bunch of teaching and learning resources, whether they're resources for you trying to understand how you might conduct some of these analysis that kind of guides you through. I mentioned a little bit about how certain studies might have those resources linked. Um, Other ones will not be linked because maybe they're more general, but those are great places to look if you need some guidance. There's also guidance on depositing data. So as a member institute, you can deposit your data for free through ICPSR if they feel like it fits their collection, but you can also deposit it for free through OpenICPSR, and there is guidance on the website that helps you through those steps. Um, I am also here as guidance to help you through that step since I can sit down with you and talk to you a little bit one-on-one about curation, what things to look for so that you can prepare your own data set for deposit. And that's pretty much it. This is what we have. So thank you for your time and attention. I hope this workshop helped you feel a little more confident about using this library resource and exposed you to some interesting collections. I'm going to put some links into chat right now. I'm going to put a link to the slides. Whoops. Oh no, everything disappeared. Okay, well, I'm going to find the chat again, and I'm going to put the link to the slides in here. No, that was the link to my personal WebEx. Okay, one more time. What's the link to the slides, Daria? Okay. So this is the link to the Qualtrics survey if you want to give any feedback. And there was a link to right here. And this is the link to my slides if you want to download them and follow the links for the different collections. If you liked this workshop, we're offering one more from the series next week on using ICPSR data. That's going to be Lynette, she's going to be leading that, just how you can go about using the data set on that site and what are some considerations for reusing the secondary data you find. She will share her expertise with us and lead that discussion. And all the recordings can be found on the YouTube. So if that is something that you are interested in rewatching or you want to watch the one that already happened, that's where you can find them. And finally, if you need any additional personalized assistance, whether that's finding secondary data for your project, help with depositing your data to meet funder journal requirements, or any other data needs, feel free to schedule a consultation with me. I'm happy to chat about your project no matter where you are in your data lifecycle. Also happy to take questions now, whether that's questions for me or questions for Lynette. We will be here and can feel free to ask us directly. Thank you so much.